And hello, everybody. Welcome to Coffee, Kegs, and Kriegsspiel. I'm your host, Marshall. I am joined here by Paul Lafondios, Jan, Achilles, and Otto. And I think we're going to have a couple more. Oh, here's KB has just joined. Good to see your circle with an anonymous head in it, KB. And we are going to talk about yesterday's battle, where the Red Army smashed into a German position, and we're going to see how that unfolded. All right. Before we do that, though, I would like to ask Jan to give us sort of a report or an update on what he's been doing this weekend with, what is it, Armchair Generals?
Armchair Dragoons.
Dragoons. Okay.
Yes, this weekend is the Armchair Dragoons Digital Convention, which is still running. So there are still game sessions today and presentations right now. So if you want to grab a ticket for just a few bucks and play some online games, that's a great opportunity. Paul and I, we gave a presentation yesterday on sort of our title was 200 years of wargaming, of modern wargaming, Kriegsspiel now and then. And I think we were able to cover sort of a glimpse of the historical development, the most important steps, and then Paul went into more of not a freestyle format, but much more creative, focusing on what we're doing at the IKS and how we can use modern technology and so forth to facilitate our games and make them an interesting narrative experience, and also how you could use Kriegsspiel to solve modern problems. Paul, what was your impression of that?
Yeah, I think it was a great overview. We were focused on hobbyists and hobby gamers, and so we wanted to make it relevant for the types of games they were playing today, and show how we were bringing the concepts of Kriegsspiel to a modern audience.
Right. So unfortunately, for today we had a game session scheduled for right now. We had to cancel that due to lack of registration. We are currently trying to figure out what the reasons for that is. There might be several reasons. A few guys have already answered the poll and said whether they were signed up for other events or they didn't quite know what to expect when we're talking about Kriegsspiel. So we find that out because in the very first ACDCs, our games were booked out, and then the participation numbers declined. Sometimes we had 8 players signed up, but only 3 would show up actually to play the game. Sometimes nobody would sign up. So we are trying to find out what the reasons for that is. Maybe we just need to do better advertising for those. But it's a great event. So if you have the chance in the future to join the ACDC, there will be one in the summer probably again, then take that chance.
Yeah, let's go ahead and make that a big drive for us to get a good turnout there, and really, kind of put our name there on the programs so that they know that we're going to be there, and we're going to be there in force, and we're going to run a really good, high quality event. So yeah, we'll make that. We'll turn this one around for this summer. Absolutely, I pledge my support and participation. All right, let's talk about, let's see here. We got everybody on. Let's talk about what happened yesterday. Oh my goodness. You can see my messy hair. Look at my hair. It's just a complete mess. Wow. Well, I just got up, I live in the past. These guys all live in Europe in the future. Achilles and I, we live on the Pacific coast. And it's morning for us. That's why we call it Coffee, Kegs, and Kriegsspiel, because when some of us are having coffee, some of you are ready for a nice frosty beer. So there we have it. Okay, enough of that. Let's talk about the battle. And I'm going to go ahead and present on my share screen is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to share my tabletop simulator. And how did I even end up in here? This is, well, we're in the right spot. So there we go. Okay. Otto, we see the table And let's go ahead and talk about what happened. Why don't you give us a good little overview of the scenario, kind of, everything. I think you know what you're doing, so just go for it, man.
All right. So yesterday, I hosted with a great umpire team a historical scenario based in 1944, in the middle of Operation Bagration in the Tartu offensive in Estonia. And in this scenario, a Red Army regiment, a rifle regiment, was spearheading the attack towards the German positions on the Marienburg line, which were defended by a measly Jäger battalion of the 12th Luftwaffe Division. To briefly go over the scenario, the Soviet troops performed a concentrated attack on this position, the positions of the 3rd Jäger Company, to create a breach for the incoming reinforcements from the rest of the rifle division. With the artillery, they concentrated 2 artillery regiments on the position of this lonesome Jäger company and were able to pierce through the enemy lines. Although some very brave survivors with only left the option to fight to the death fought a grueling close quarters battle for over an hour on the southern end of the trench line. The Soviets then, I think after an hour after their first breach, begun advancing towards the village of Molnica, the next positions of the the German defensive line, which was being defended by the 1st Jäger Company, which was becoming to be reinforced by troops being diverted from the rear. The 5th Jäger Company was being acting as the battalion's reserve. As the Soviets were sending in their next battalion, their 2nd battalion, while the 1st battalion was licking their wounds and preparing to defend the breach in case of an enemy counterattack, the German artillery, which was for a moment paralyzed due to Soviet artillery hitting their headquarters, was called by the German second in command. His player tag was KB, who is with us here, who called in an artillery strike on the Soviet 2nd Battalion, crossing the open and the 2 barbed wire. And the German artillery was able to devastate this Soviet fresh battalion. Just in the first combat of the day, they took within 30 minutes, I think, 50% casualties. Of course, the hero of the moment, Captain KB, unfortunately was bombarded and killed on the spot by the Soviets' next pre-planned barrage. The Germans then were able to pull back their forces to their next line of defense, sending more and more forces, and were able to halt the Soviet attack near Sabelina. And the game was then declared over after 5 hours of grueling combat, and all of the soldiers likely suffering from tinnitus from perhaps over 100 artillery pieces firing throughout the game. And the Soviets then were able to make a secure breach in the German line, and thus won the game, albeit the Germans outnumbered 2-1 in terms of infantry, and I think, in artillery they was really outnumbered because they had 3 batteries of artillery to the Soviets' 18. So the Germans were able to stand up for their fatherland, but in the end, the the situation was hopeless for them.
Did the German commander run away, actually?
Yes, the German first in command dog pilot, who happens not to be here with us today, did indeed.
Well, of course he ran away.
Yeah, he disappeared to the northwest. I think his last words were "choose," meaning goodbye. In the battalion command net, his faith is unclear.
All right. Well, let's talk about today's battle. KB would probably be the one person who knows about the German strategy, right? So let's ask KB if he will describe or talk about the German strategy for the battle. What did you guys anticipate? And how did you react when it was clear to you that the Soviets were doing something a little bit different than what you anticipated?
Hello. Yeah, so our plan, I don't know if you can revert it back to like the beginning save on the TTS table. You have it, Otto?
Oh yeah, sorry, I was doing something. Did you want the beginning save for the game?
Yes, if you have it.
It's this. I'll just move the pieces a bit further back.
Oh, okay.
Then all of them are at their beginning positions at 6
Oh.
a.m. Also, I think you're using your webcam microphone.
Oh, is it really bad?
It could be better, but yeah.
Okay. Does this work?
Try again.
Hello, testing.
Yeah, there we go.
It's not a good stream without the technical difficulties.
Yeah, there we go. But now it's perfect. Continue.
So our defensive strategy revolved around having kind of this three-layered network. So we would have three companies, one third line company, one second line company, and one first line company. And in these companies, if we zoom in, we would have divided them into a first, second, third, and fallback position. So the idea was that the Soviets were probably going to be coming up the roads from the south. Hence, we positioned the forward two companies down here. Unfortunately, we quickly found out that the Soviets were, in fact, coming through the forest, meaning they were still hitting our first company first, but they were also hitting our third company second, and our second company were all out of place and had to relocate. And during the whole planning of this, we were pretty certain that we were going to be quite disgustingly outnumbered, and we weren't really going to stand a chance. So we were just trying to set up whatever we could to delay the Soviets and maybe discourage them from continuing the attack, knowing that we can't really materially beat them. We would have to try to play on their morale instead, I think.
You had a really good artillery drop over here on the right as the Soviets were preparing a major attack. How did you know to drop the artillery where you did?
Well, so me and Dogpilot created a little sheet
here. Yeah.
With previously made artillery positions. I think there were something like this and this and this and all around here, so we could quite clearly communicate where the artillery needed to be. The initial reason why I traveled over there was really just to see if third company, which had just been bombarded, was actually able to retreat, or whether we were going to have to write them off as completely destroyed. And then upon arriving there, I could obviously see what I think was thousands of Soviets in the tree line. And yeah, I managed to call in the artillery just before my position was also erased from the
map. One last question. Did you believe at any time that you could win this scenario? KB, you're muted.
I was under the impression that the scenario was pretty much unwinnable unless we managed to discourage the Soviets from continuing to attack. We were pretty sure they had the firepower and the numbers to attack and take our positions if they were just willing to slug their way forward. So we were kind of hoping that maybe they'll call off the attack at some point if we just bleed them enough. Which unfortunately they did not. So.
Okay, so it would be safe to say that you never expected to win in a conventional sense, as in prevent or repulse the Soviet attack. You were like, they're going to come and they're going to gain some ground on us no matter what, and it is what it is. We're just going to try to hang on and survive. Would that be correct?
Yeah, we were kind of just trying to see the position and try to make the most correct decisions in the situation as possible, despite knowing that we're probably outmatched anyways.
Okay, that's important. We'll probably come back to that if time allows. But now I want to go to the Soviet commander, Achilles, and his second in command, Lafondios. Now, I really personally, between you and me here, I really think that this was cruelty on Otto's part to make you face off against these two guys. But hey, welcome to Kriegsspiel. Welcome to the IKS.
Hey, Otto's middle name is Cruelty, so
Yeah.
Just look at him there.
Look at him. He's ice cold, man.
I bet he is right this time of year. All right, Achilles, tell us what the plan was, and then tell us, did you believe that you were going to win, or did you think, no, we're probably not going to win? What was your attitude going into this?
Well, I'll start with the last part first. Yeah,
Mhm.
I believed that. Well, I believed that there was it could go either way at the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And if it didn't go against us at the very beginning, then we were going to achieve at least our first two objectives. At the very beginning, it could have gone really wrong. I mean, we were bunched up at the assault point, and if they had put that artillery barrage on both those battalions right then as we were jumping off, we would have lost. We'd have lost 2/3 of the regiment right there.
Mm-hmm.
So that would have been a disaster. And then once the initial attack, which Great Gold led, because he was temporary commander of 1st Battalion, if that doesn't breach that first trench line and secure the breach area, then everything else is all bunched up back there, and we're not going anywhere. So that was the first key to everything. That had to be achieved in order for us to accomplish anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Now, from that point, once that was successful, then it was a question of, how far can we go? And that would be a matter of resources and the effectiveness of the German defense. We start out with a regiment, and yes, we do outnumber the defenders, but that's how you plan attacks anyway. You don't attack 1-to-1, but that doesn't mean an attack is going to succeed. It just means that you have the numbers to achieve it, so it gives you a better chance. I mean, 2-to-1 is marginal. 3-to-1 is much better, and you prefer 6-to-1. Well, we didn't have 6-to-1. In just counting infantry, so we're not at an Otto victory in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
But it would be a question of just how far the regiment could go, and that a single regiment, even against a depleted German regiment or a battalion like this, it's not going to, we're not going to drive all the way to Riga or something. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's just not within the cards. You have to limit your sights to what the resources you have available are. How far is this unit capable of going in a single leap? And our function, our job, our task, if you will, was to create a hole, create a breach for the follow-on forces to exploit. And so when we did the planning, we created the initial breach target, which was that territory, that area between Hill 129.2 and Gorodisek. And that was the target for the initial breach, and that was 1st Battalion's task, was to make that initial breach. The second objective would be Molnica, and to me, that was the center of gravity for this area, and it was the most important objective. Once we were able to make the initial breach, we needed to be able to take Molnica. If we couldn't take and secure the area around Molnica, then this would be a failure from my point of view. Beyond that, I wanted to push towards Sabelina. And that was, as I kept saying, that was a nice to have, not necessary. I mean, it wasn't essential, but it was nice to have if we could get all the way there. But I wanted to get at least as far as we could towards Sabelina. I would have liked to have taken Sabelina. That would have been great. I was hoping that by the time Molnica fell, 2nd Battalion would be relatively intact, or at least capable of supporting 3rd Battalion on its push north. Unfortunately, 2nd Battalion got almost erased by a single artillery barrage, which is exactly that was my biggest fear going into the whole thing, was the German artillery, more than anything else, was because they had the flexibility and could bring it in on call, which we did not have. And that was, of course, the biggest challenge for us, which was we had to pre-plan our barrages. And at the same time, it was not just pre-planned for the location, it was pre-planned for the timing. Unlike when Marshall had a similar problem in an earlier game, where he could use a code word to call it in, so he could create he could control the timing of it. We didn't have that option. So the timing had to be pre-planned as well. And that meant a lot of guesswork as to where it was going to need to be and when it was going to need to be there. And that's the challenge. And that was a fun challenge from my point of view, was looking at the map with very little information other than I could see the trench lines and roughly know the Germans are out there, trying to determine when and where those barrages were going to land. And that was kind of fun. But it's looking at that map, and one of the barrages, the one that hit Bereznyuki, and took out the German artillery headquarters, that I picked that spot because of its location, because you can see the trail network running out of it. It's further back. I assumed that if the Germans were going to have some kind of mobile force in the rear that they could reaction force, it would be around that vicinity, because it would be able to get to any of the locations using those trails. And of course, it's part of the deep battle plan. If you got any support elements, headquartered elements, that sort of thing, I figured it would be somewhere in that vicinity. So we did put one there. The initial barrage was all across the line from Mitkovice going east. That way, it didn't give a clue as to where the main effort was going to be made, but at the same time could suppress the line and hopefully pin forces in place. Particularly, my concern was being counterattacked from the west around Mitkovice. So by putting a suppressive fire there initially, we get them to stay in place, not knowing if that's going to be the target. And in this case, that worked well, because they actually thought that was going to be the target from the beginning. So we hadn't clued them in yet as to where we were really going until that assault actually hit their front line. And by that point, it's almost too late. You're not going to be able to stop us from breaching the initial line. The only thing you could hope to do is try to counterattack us at Molnica. So that's where we got. And then we did eventually take Molnica with the 3rd Battalion, which was in reserve and could be used for that purpose. It did take Molnica, and then it was still intact, so we pushed it north towards Sabalina. But there was no support for it from 2nd Battalion, really, except for scattered elements, because 2nd Battalion had been pretty much shattered. And it was counterattacked up there as it was pushing towards Sabalina. So once it reached a certain point, rather than destroy the last battalion that I have available in the field that's still effective, I gave an order for it to halt its advance and pull back to a more defensible line northeast of Molnica, figuring that we had achieved the breach that we needed to achieve, and having that battalion get wiped out trying to get to Sabalina wasn't worth the effort.
All right, that's really cool. So yeah, you made a change of mission order, and you did it because the circumstances of the battle substantially changed, which is when you issue a change of mission order. And that's one of the few critical decisions that a Kriegsspiel or battle commander gets to make during a battle. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that for everybody on here, that one of the things that you do is there's only a few big decisions you make in a game when you're a high-level commander, and when to issue a change of mission is one of them. Achilles, do you want to talk briefly about the change of mission order? How did you know it was time to issue that order?
When they were pushing forward, Paul and I were near where that attack was going in, and Paul was directing the direct support artillery up there, and we had to report that the direct support artillery basically was on their last rounds of ammunition. So they were not going to be able to continue to support an effort going that direction. And we had a counterattack in that wooded region to our west. Now, the counterattack that came in was actually a very small force. And at this point, the mortars had all fired all their ammunition, so we had the mortar crews come up to act as basically reserve infantry in the very far rear. The very front part, the spearhead of our force, which was at this point was 9th Company, which had not been engaged prior and was still completely fresh. That was the one I think that was pushing the furthest north, and it hit the line and wasn't able to take that line initially. And I knew there wasn't enough behind it to support a second effort, and that's when I decided, okay, we've gone as far as our resources are going to let us go. So it was time to pull back to a more defensible position that we could hold.
Yeah. So in other words, you ran into a situation where, according to your calculus, you were basically out of steam.
Yeah.
And the enemy was showing signs of vitality, and that they were counterattacking, and they were able to resist, at critical points. Just said, look, okay, we've expended our resources. We've satisfied the conditions of honor. We have accomplished our mission as set forth by the orders. Change of mission now. Hold and defend.
I'll throw in here the discussion we were having at the time. One of the elements that is important to think through is infantry attacking trench lines is an artillery and infantry fight, and we had expended all of our artillery. So it was really the resources weren't necessarily people. It was we were out of ammunition, and so it would have been foolhardy to continue on without half of the combat power that you really need to accomplish the objective. So that was a big part of the calculus. Less the blocks that you see here look a little bigger than they were. I think it was less about the enemy and more about, okay, we really don't have the right materials to move forward.
Yeah. We could no longer do any kind of combined arms effort there.
Yeah. Okay, one more thing for you, Achilles, before I let you off the hook for the moment. And we're going to come back to you because we have a really fun discussion to have with you in a minute.
Oh boy.
But first, I predicted early on in the live cast that this is what the Germans were expecting, that they would expect that you would come through this open ground. And then I said a smart commander is actually going to come here through the broken ground. Now, what would most IKS players do? Well, they would choose option number one. Let's just attack through the open field and gloriously lose half of our formation and, call it a win. Whereas you made this decision. Now, why on earth did you choose to attack through some of this terrain? And I'm looking at this terrain and I'm like, man, this is tough stuff here. You got some swamps here or some marsh. You've got a really high ridge line here, which is probably 4 or 5 feet as far as I know. I don't know what the hash lines, what the difference in elevation is, maybe a meter, because it'd be metric system. So maybe a meter. I don't know. Someone else can tell me what the each line represents. Actually, I guess I could count if I look at the thick lines and the thin ones. I could figure it out myself.
You can see that the highest point in that entire area is that benchmark at 129.2.
Yeah.
And you can also see that there's another benchmark up there. I think it's at 118 or something like that.
Right there.
So that's only a difference of 11 meters between those two locations. The briefing said that, even though there's a lot of contour lines on here, this ground is not particularly hilly. It's really gentle in that sense.
Okay, yeah, I was wondering about that, and I'm like, well, is that kind of a big elevation change, and are they going to be able to get up that hill? Is that hill assailable from down below? So I was looking at this, so I'm like, this is kind of a tough slog to go through here. But anyway, let's talk about your calculus. Why did you decide to go through here instead of the open ground?
It's interesting because I look at that I looked at the map when he first gave it to me, and I immediately thought, okay, this is where you go, is through the woods. All right, because well, first of all, to start off, we have no vehicles, so I'm not worried about trucks needing roads. I'm not worried about tanks going through rough ground and forest or anything like that. This is infantry. And this is World War II infantry. It can flow through woods. It's not really that big a challenge for their movement. It'll slow them down a little bit, but not a lot. And we're starting close enough to our jump off point with enough time from the initial barrage, the pause, the secondary barrage, and then the smoke to get our forces up to the line. And we did count the distances from our initial starting points, and tried to approximate how long it would take for our forces to get there. But that, to me, when I looked at the map, it basically jumps off the page to me. Is yes, you use that because that's the covered approach. If we try to come across that open ground from Utsa or down around Gorahova. Yeah. If we're trying to come through there, we're going to get massacred. There's virtually no cover. There's open ground. Once they see us coming, they could concentrate whatever artillery batteries they have on us, and any kind of machine gun fire. So looking at that, and also looking at, and then even if you do make it up onto that small plateau, you've got wire, you've got trenches, and you've got a town there, Mitkovica, all of which are going to be strong points. Trying to get through that without losing more than half your regiment, just to make the initial breach, it just doesn't make sense. So the only way to do it was to go the other way. Plus, there was another benefit to this by coming out. If you look at the edge of the tree line where we did come out, you can see the tree line ends where the German trenches are out in the open ground.
Yeah.
So we're close to what I think is the key objective, which is Molnica, which I think is the center of gravity. We can capture the highest point in the area, which is 129.2. And they're out in the open. We're still in the tree line when we come out. And we're right on top of them, basically. So there's very little time for them to react. Once they get hit by that huge barrage, which was both regiments in a concentrated area on the point of where the breach was going to be done, that was going to be massively suppressing, and it was. And then, of course, we doused the whole area with smoke. The chances of whatever force they had right there at the point of contact of putting up a resistance that was going to prevent us from breaking through was almost nil.
Yeah.
That they fought as long as they did and as well as they did is actually a true testament to them, because really there shouldn't have been much of anything left of them. They should have just got run over. So they did actually better than you would think they would. But yeah, they really didn't have a chance. They had no chance at all of holding that after that. And that's what you need to do, because you're trying to break the equilibrium here. You've punched the initial hole. You've created the breach. You're using what Paul and I talked about, that this was essentially a breach assault from the beginning. And so we use the formulaic method of performing that, which is SOSRA. And so that's exactly what we did there. And it was tremendously effective. But once you've done that, once you've made that initial breach, it makes the next part a little easier.
Good. Okay. This discussion gave rise to a few more questions. I'm trying to get on to the rest of the podcast, but this is so interesting here. First of all, you used a term called center of gravity in reference to Molnica. Can you go ahead and define for our membership what that means? What is center of gravity?
Yeah, it's actually interesting term to define here. It means kind of what you think it does. It's the point in his in this area that is the key to the area. It's where his defense is centered around. And if you break it, if you take that spot, you can go from Molnica. You can go in any direction. Once that spot is lost, it opens up every possibility. It opens up the drive northeast. It opens up the drive north. It opens up the drive west. So it's where his line is essentially centered, and where you can break. If you break it there, you can go in any of those possibilities and cut off the other parts. So it's where everything kind of flows together. And looking at the map, I think Molnica was the obvious choice there, because of its not only center of gravity doesn't have to be in the center necessarily.
Right.
In this case, it was, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. But in this case, it was. It was such an obvious location for him to center his defense around, going east and west. And as I say, once it was penetrated, or once it's secured, it makes it possible for you to attack in any direction you want.
We were also worst casing that there was a mobile defense that would a mobile reaction force, and Molnica is a road junction. And so the center of gravity would be that which is necessary for the defense. So what was necessary for them to quickly get a mobile reaction force was the road network, and Molnica sat in the middle of that.
Yeah.
Actually, Paul just said everything I just said, only he said it in one sentence instead of 3 paragraphs. So,
Well, maybe it's time to call
I'm a
on
man
Paul.
of few words.
Okay, I have more I could get into, but we don't have the time. So let's move on. Paul, what was your role, and what did you contribute to the glorious victory for Stalin that you won here?
Sure. I acted as the 2IC, or really the staff. So I did the fire plan, and then during the battle, I took in the 2nd Battalion's attack, and then I went back to the 3rd Battalion and took in the 3rd Battalion. So I acted as the implementing staff for Achilles' plan. Really, I was just going to where the action was, and that was my role in this battle.
All right. We had a really cool episode, and then we're going to start getting into some questions and some other things here. But we had a really interesting episode. I don't know if it was really cool. It was cool to me, where a couple of Soviet commanders were ordered to go to Molnica, and instead they decided to go basically around this way. And I guess their objective was to outflank the enemy on the far side of a swamp. I don't know. And they were caught doing that because they went outside of the operational area, probably for the whole division. And what did you do with those guys, Achilles? And how did that conversation go? Which it's on the live stream as well if people want to watch it. Go ahead.
yeah, the conversation. Well, I'm sure it wasn't a pleasant one on the receiving end for. In the end, well, one of them at least had the excuse that he was following the orders of 1st Battalion commander. So I told him to take his remaining force and get to Molnica where he was supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
All right. The other one wasn't even from that same battalion. So I'm not sure why he was following along or what he thought he was doing. And for him, I had him arrested, and he relieved of command, arrested, and he had to follow me around the rest of the day. And I, of course, told him that I was going to shoot him, but I wasn't going to shoot him in the head. I was going to start low and work my way up because I had 9 bullets in my weapon.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
I think one of the interesting points about this incident is obviously it was really kind of funny because it was a couple of IKS players, seeking a flank. But it also demonstrated that you really are not contributing if you don't stay within the bounds of the resources in the plan. So we were passing the 3rd Battalion north. The obvious thing to do to continue to contribute was to move to Melnica to defend to the west. They decided they were going to go on a flanking maneuver that just made no sense from a gameplay perspective, from a historical perspective, or from a Soviet doctrine perspective. So the whole thing was just kind of silly, but it also showed what they were doing wasn't actually helping either.
Right. And they had, Paul had sent 3 different, I believe it was 3 different dispatches to these guys to tell them to go to Molnica, and they, went off on their own anyway. So it's like, okay, yeah, you guys are done.
Yeah. I wanted to ask Otto, because Otto, as the master lead umpire here, it was the one who was alerted to this situation. He also alerted me to it. I was kind of monitoring it because I knew that they were going to try this because I was there when they discussed it. But Otto, as an umpire, how did you deal with this when players decide, I'm going to break this scenario. I'm going to go out of the boundaries of this scenario?
Well, we had told the players in the briefing that this scenario was going to be trying to be as realistic as possible. And we also encourage role play because we found that would also make the player be in the mindset of a Soviet or a German commander better. And the thing is that if you are a Soviet officer and you received the military training, you're familiar with their tactics and strategy, and you understand in the culture of the Red Army, hierarchy is key. So it was a and the other thing is that the battle plan is the main thing. The Soviet war machine is a well-oiled machine if every cog knows its place. And here this was a clear attempt at insubordination, because Comrade Colonel Achilles' orders clearly weren't being respected, and neither was his authority. And by not following the battle plan, which was for these two companies to attack Molnica head on this way, they put the lives of the other comrades and the rest of the operation at risk, because everyone was supposed to know what they had rehearsed and follow their plan. This sector, meanwhile, it's a whole in this grand operation, in the Tartu offensive, there were over 200,000 Red Army soldiers working, and these other sectors would be filled with other divisions with their own very clear battle plan. So I decided to resolve it in a realistic fashion. The players were not said outright, "You can't do this," but instead there was a local commissar and Red Army soldiers on this hill, and we basically showed that to the players and said to them that a local officer walks up to you and questions, what on earth are you doing? And they were basically shouted down by a local officer and the troops, and saw the friendly troops there. And then a messenger from this local officer was sent to the regimental commander, informing Achilles of the situation.
Mm-hmm. As an umpire, would you ever remove a player from command or from a game for any particular reasons? Would disobedience to an order be a justification? Or what if the commander says, I want this subordinate, arrested or removed from the game because they're not following orders? Would you do that as an umpire, and why?
If I found it realistic, yes. Usually, I try to emphasize to the players that real life commanders are not sacked or even executed willy-nilly by their fellow commanders. Achilles' order threats to shoot the company officer was quite comedic, so it flies by. So it's not that big of a deal, but usually I try to really keep it to a realistic extent, and I think Achilles' choice to take him from his command was somewhat realistic. Of course, we don't live in this period, so we don't exactly know the culture, so we can't always make the situation as realistic. So I try to keep it within the world of the game. I rather not say to the player, "You can't do this in this game." I instead make it an in-game event that a commissar walks up to you and says, ask you questions, "What are you doing? You can't do this."
Fantastic. Yeah, that's how to do it. I feel on occasions, like when I've run into the situation where players are just doing willy-nilly things, sometimes they get wounded or killed. But otherwise, yeah, you let the players kind of do what they want to do, even if it's a little bit off script. And then, there are ways to deal with it, like Otto has shown us. And there are other creative ways to deal with it. But I think the best defense is a good offense, and to tell the players up front that these are the boundaries of the scenario. Do not leave the boundaries of the scenario. This is the expected behavior. And of course, this does demonstrate that no matter how careful you write the scenario, some players are just going to do what they're going to do. And what can you do about it?
I would quickly.
ahead.
I would like to add one sentence that this actually in-game event of these two company commanders trying to not follow the battle plan. Like I said, the battle plan is key, and working together is key in the Red Army. This had direct consequences to the rest of the army. The German troops, because they were not attacked, they were able to retreat, and the rest of the army was put in disarray for a moment because there was no attack happening, and this might have cost dearly in the lives of the Red Army.
Yeah. KB, you died during the battle, didn't you, KB?
Yeah, 90
Yeah.
minutes in.
Oh my goodness, that's rough. And we had another German commander. It was his first Kriegsspiel, and he was the one that just got hammered with the artillery. Like he got hammered really, really hard. So I think what I want to ask here, and maybe I'll go to Achilles with this one, is you have a plan, whatever that plan may be, and this is kind of a general question. And right from the outset, everything just goes off the rails. Is there any kind of a calculus or a sort of a decision tree that you work through? How do you respond when everything goes wrong right from the start? Me, I just go back to bed, but what do you do?
Time to play with the dogs. See ya.
Yeah, see, I'm out.
Oh, I seem to have fallen down the stairs. Paul, you're in command.
There you go.
I don't know. I think you can't know how things are going to go off the rail, but I think the most effective thing that you can do is before the fight even starts, you have to have, plan B. Whatever you are going to order, think, okay, what happens when this goes completely wrong? What's my response? If you've already thought through those before the first shot is fired, then it makes responding to the situation much faster and more effective. What you don't want to be doing is scrambling at the moment of, oh well, my first assault didn't work, and I don't know, I had no second plan, so now I've got to scramble around and figure out how to do a second assault. Just like, and it did happen to us here when 2nd Battalion got hammered by the German artillery. I mean, that wasn't supposed to happen, right? They were supposed to take Malnica. So it was my hope that they would be able to take it and still be relatively intact. And that way 3rd Battalion could go on. But
let me add to your point there. Is you did a great job, Achilles, of defining the intent. So the rails in this case were less important than the intent of taking Malnica. And so when that 2nd Battalion got hit, that was really things going very wrong. And so we shifted the 3rd and pivoted to have the 3rd take Malnica because we were just looking at the current situation in relation to the intent. So I think how we handle it in this scenario is when things go wrong, look at your intent and then adjust from where you're at to the intent. And that's how I think you keep a plan generally on the rails until you cannot service the intent, in which case you pull out and say, this one didn't work.
Yeah, perfect. And I talked about that during the podcast about, when should you, let's say you're a subordinate, how much leeway do you have in the interpretation of your orders? How much room to maneuver do you get? And for me, the answer is if you understand the commander's intent or the intent of the mission and, being a little flexible or pushing a boundary, if it serves that intent, then at least you have a defense at your court-martial, or maybe you win and you get a medal. But if it doesn't service the intent, then the answer should just be a no. Don't do it.
Yeah. And it helps to, in your initial plan, you need to have the resources available in the area where you need that flexibility. If, for example, my 3rd Battalion was going to do, and this would be a not an uncommon Kriegsspiel plan, if I had planned for just 1st and 2nd Battalion to make the main attack over there, and then 3rd Battalion was going to make a diversionary or spoiler attack, say through Gorgova up towards Mitkovica, that wouldn't have been an unreasonable IKS plan. You could picture somebody doing it exactly that way. Maybe a delayed attack in that direction or something like that. If I had made that as the plan, then the wipeout of 2nd Battalion near Molnica means the entire thing is gone, because I no longer have the resources anywhere near where I think the main effort has to be in order to accomplish it. My 3rd Battalion is now engaged at Mitkovica and unable to go up there. 1st Battalion is not effective enough to take Molnica because they did the breach assault, and 2nd Battalion has just gotten clobbered. There's nothing left. I have no reserve. I have nothing left to use over there. But you could see that being a plan in an IKS battle easily. It's by having overwhelming force at the critical point that I'm able to have the flexibility to adjust to that situation. So 2nd Battalion gets clobbered. Okay, 2nd Battalion becomes the reserve, and 3rd Battalion has to accomplish the mission.
Yeah, you keep using this big fancy $10 word which starts with the letter R, and I don't think any of us know what it means.
Well, I believe Blazer said something about I had done it all wrong because I didn't realize that the longest line wins.
Right. Yeah, what's a reserve? Is that what it's called, a reserve? You did have a good use of reserves, and actually both sides had reserves even to the end. Especially the Germans, and I think that saved the Germans. I'll let Otto speak a little bit about that. The German reserves were not particularly numerous, but they had them lined up going all the way back to Sabalina, and I think it made a difference. Otto, what do you think of that?
Well, I've tried to make the system as realistic as possible, so there is a very high chance that any troops attacking will, even after 15 minutes, become very exhausted and will need someone else to take up the mantle and push ahead. This also makes counterattacks quite viable, and the German commanders, CIC Dog Pilot, who isn't here with us today, and 2IC KB were informed a bit about the real-life tactics and strategy of the German army, just like where Achilles and Paul about the tactics of the Red Army, and the German use of counterattacks and reserves in defense was emphasized in the military. And in this game, they worked, they utilized them quite well with troops basically with companies covering each other as they retreated, and even a counterattack being made to which led to the destruction of one Soviet company in this forest in the last stage of the game, and also blunted the Soviet further attacks to the north. Of course, it could be argued that at this moment in real life, the Soviets would themselves have their own reserves, that being another rifle regiment coming in to attack. But yeah, that's why I decided to end the game there, because that would be the moment for that likely.
Yeah.
I want to add one other thing.
Well, go ahead, Achilles.
It's kind of interesting in the planning process. The idea that you put, as we did in this case, all of our eggs over in this thrust.
Yeah.
And left German units over here just all to themselves. I mean, there was nobody over there. Okay. That would be something that a lot of players would look at that and be terrified of doing that, because you got to cover everybody. That longest line idea, but you should have something over there to cover those guys. Sometimes you can cover those guys with their own psychology.
Yes.
They know there's an attack going on over there. They know that they're on the defense, and so they sit there in their spot and they wait to be attacked. Yep. And as a result, you can actually ignore them completely. It's like in American football when you're doing an option play. If the end comes for the quarterback pitches. If he goes for the running back, the quarterback runs. Whichever way he goes, you go the other way. Well,
Mhm.
you don't have to block him. You don't have to waste a guy to block him because he's taken out of the play by the option.
Yeah.
And in this case, that was part of the thinking going into the planning, is that whatever elements they have over on this side over here essentially take themselves out of the play simply by the fact that they're waiting to be attacked, even though nobody's coming.
Yeah, they don't expect. Yeah, the idea of a counterattack or a spoiling attack doesn't even occur to them.
Mhm.
KB, let's have you speak to that briefly. Did you guys ever consider something a little bit out of the box, like a spoiling attack or a counterattack on a flank or anything like that?
No, not before I was blown up. No.
Mhm.
The idea was
not before he was blown up.
which was quite
All right.
quickly as well. The idea was
right,
always to just stall the enemy, demoralize.
We have a
So no,
question
like,
from one of our viewers. Russell Knights asks, I have questions about how you calculate how to win the fight between the two infantry. Now, Achilles, you did refer to this a little bit a while ago. Jan has been sitting here quietly, and I want to ask him how he would answer this from a Kriegsspiel perspective, because so he'll kind of give us the 19th century answer, and then we can go on to Achilles to give us the 20th century answer.
I'm not quite sure what the question is pointing at. So is that relating to?
I
Well,
thought
if
he
you
was
have-
asking.
the
I thought he was
system, or
asking
is
about
it-
the CRT. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think he's asking about the CRT, which would be Otto's field.
Yeah, I think
wouldn't
Otto can talk about how he resolves
it?
it.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, that's
Yeah.
fair enough. Let's go ahead. Go ahead, Otto.
Well, this is not School of the Empire session, but if you want to learn how the system works, there are resources on the IKS main Discord and on the website. But to make it short, it's supposed to be as realistic as possible, and there are several factors which can make the other side a bit more powerful than the other. It's really hard in modern combat to take over an entrenched position, and that's why, for example, in this situation, the Soviets utilized their artillery to great effect, and also they made an ample use of reserves, as units, as I stated before, become quite exhausted quickly in combat.
Achilles, in modern combat, how, if it's just an infantry fight, how do you calculate or figure, my guy's got to kill those guys? How do we do it?
I'm not sure I can answer that question.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think previously you said that in an attack you want a minimum of 3 to 1 odds. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you don't. I mean, just as a rule of thumb, you don't attack at 1-to-1. You don't. You try to avoid 2-to-1. You want to have a minimum of 3-to-1 on up. And 6-to-1 is usually thought of as a guaranteed win. You're gonna win it. But you also have ways of amplifying your firepower. So if you have 1-to-1 in numbers, but your guys have machine guns, mortars, artillery support, air support, and the other guy, is using, AK-47s and a couple of grenades, then, that's a multiplier. That's a force you got all these force multipliers that go into that calculation.
Yeah. I want to talk for my last talking point. I want to kind of pull the audience here, which is all of you guys, on morale, if you will, or the attitude of victory or defeat. We've touched upon it a couple times. The Germans, as we know, opened this battle with this idea that we can't win. Our goal today is to lose as little as possible and inflict as many casualties as possible, but we're going to be losing some ground here today. And that played into your calculus, Achilles, because you knew that there's no risk of them attacking through the south. So you were able to take your entire force and throw them in that northern sector to great effect. On the other hand, from the Soviet perspective, you're like, yes, we have this initial situation where it's really dicey. If they drop the artillery here, we're going to be in trouble. But otherwise, I think we're going to run the board. And of course, you went on to have great success. So in my opinion, in my belief, I should say, when it comes to Kriegsspiel, as well as most other things, attitude makes the difference. If you're of the attitude that we are going to win this, or you're of the attitude that, hey, we're going to lose this, well, to be kind of cliche about it, I think that's half the battle. Am I right or am I wrong about that? And I'll start with you, Achilles, but then I want to give everybody here an opportunity to kind of weigh in or give their perspective or angle on this, including you, KB. I want to know from you, KB, if you think that the mindset that you had that we're going to lose ground today, if that contributed to your side's defeat, or if it would be ridiculous for you to think that another outcome is even possible. But we'll start with Achilles.
I do think that, obviously your own mentality when you go into planning, it's going to have some kind of impact. If you're pessimistic about your chances, you're going to plan pessimistically, and you may miss opportunities to do something on a positive way because you didn't think there would be any. So that's certainly possible. Otherwise, one thing that I think if I were in the German position, I would have set myself a different standard for what I thought was winning. And then when somebody asked me, okay, what do you feel you need to do today? I would have said, we need to hold this place. If we're still in possession of this ground at the end of the day, then in my opinion, we've won. Something like that. I would have had that kind of idea going in.
Okay, Lafondios, we're going to go to you next and kind of get your take on this, and then we're going to go to KB for his feelings on this. Go ahead.
Just to add the thought that it just changes your objectives. So as a player, you're going to play for 5 hours. So if you feel outnumbered, you're going to change your objectives, and Achilles already covered it. So in this case, you say if we hold X at the end, then we have achieved our objectives. I think the term win and lose is somewhat charged and sports-like.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody really wins or loses in these. You either achieve your objectives or not. And in fact, both sides could achieve their objectives, but have consider it a win. So if the defense considered Sabalina to be the last line of defense, and the Soviets considered Molnica the area they wanted to go and take, both sides could achieve their objectives
and claim victory at the end of the day.
Right on.
Yeah. Okay, KB, what do you want to have to say? Go ahead, KB. I'll let you speak on this.
I think me and Dogpilot at least changed our idea of what winning was in this scenario. So we weren't thinking that winning is holding this ground, or winning is keeping this area or dislodging an enemy position here. We were thinking that we as players are winning if we're making the correct decisions throughout the battle. So you're always looking to make what is the most correct thing I can do? What is the most powerful move I can do to try to hinder the enemy or stop the enemy or kill as many of the enemies as possible before they dislodge our position. So we changed our objective of what winning is to something more arbitrary, doing what we thought is the ultimate best move. And I think we did that. I think all the players in our team, particularly the Mitkovitzy company commander, definitely played extremely well and accomplished their objective. And I think they're winners from the game.
Wonderful. You are all winners just for showing up and participating. Do you know that? Anyway, let me go to, I'm going to ask Jan in a moment for sort of the historical perspective on morale and all of that. But first I'm going to go to Otto. Otto, as an umpire who you've run a lot of games, And what I like about your games is they're not fair and they're not balanced. They are historical, and you may have been handed a very understrength unit or a very overstrength unit, or you have strict limitations and they are inflexible. You have done a lot of these, and I'm sure that players walk away from their briefing with a mindset of victory or a mindset of defeat, and they bring that into the game. And when they're in the game doing that, do you think it makes a difference in how they play?
Oh, that is a difficult question. Well, I think I'll just say that I like to focus on realism, really. I could maybe think of this battle as a historical reenactment, not just because I've tried to make the scenario as historical as possible with lots of background information as well, but due to the fact that, like some historical reenactments, the outcome is already decided, and in this case, it's really the Germans are really likely to lose. Of course, I always don't want to. I always want to play to the absolute end. For example, the German counterattack was really interesting. So I think the historical perspective, I'm not sure if this answers the question, but really plays into the mindset of the players, and I think it really helps them to really put themselves in the shoes of a period commander. For example, what KB said about it was a great contrast with how the Achilles and Lafandios kind of had more of a clear goal, Sabellina or Molnica. And KB, meanwhile, because the Soviet commanders focus on the plan, and KB, meanwhile, kind of, I think, had intentionally or unintentionally kind of taken from the mindset of the German doctrine of World War II, which is initiative and quickly adapting to the circumstances. And like he said, his subordinates thought about what is the best thing they can do at that situation. So I'm not sure if that answered the question. It was quite difficult.
No worries, Otto. And you know what? The more we reflect on these questions, we might have more answers in the future. And hey, there's post something in the Discord, or we can always go live again and talk about it, because these are very deep and complex issues. But they have a practical bearing, because your morale in a Kriegsspiel game, I feel, has a direct impact on how you play. And the life lesson is, if you take that lesson and apply it to real life, if you have the attitude of victory or success versus an attitude of defeat, it's going to come through in the things that you do in your everyday life, whether it's a business negotiation or a competitive sporting event or whatever it may be. Or, I think I can really pass this test, I can ace this course, or I'm going to fail this test and I'm going to do poorly in this class. Whatever it may be, I think you can apply this to that. And that's what I like about Kriegsspiel. I want to go to Jan for the historical 19th century idea of morale and how important it is, and the commander's mindset. So I'm going to let him talk about that. And then it's time to wrap up, but I want to go through all of you, starting with Otto, and just ask for some final comments or observations on yesterday's event, and then we'll wrap up. So Jan, what can you tell us about original Kriegsspiel? And when I say original, I basically mean 19th century Kriegsspiel, and the concept of morale, and how important was that to warfare of the time period, or whatever? Go ahead.
Sure. So first, I would like to add that with our games, we of course have the problem that players are sort of situationally thrown into the situation, into the scenario. They are not really in the shoes of the commanders, of course. They haven't fought for weeks or months or years even. They don't know their men. They have no attachment to them, to the blocks, and so forth. And that makes it a little bit difficult. It's a reason why I wouldn't call these sort of simulations reenactments, really, because history can never be reenacted. However, the mindset of the commanders and the soldiers and so forth plays a big role in battles. In any period, if we look at the 19th century Napoleonic Wars, and we take a look at the Napoleonic marshals, they all are quite the characters, right? So we have very dashing commanders who are very aggressive, reckless even, and still accomplish their missions. They're very valuable in certain situations. If you know how they will behave on the battlefield, then you know where to place them to achieve your objective. Others might be rather pragmatic. I'm thinking of Saint-Cyr, who used to really, when he thought he had achieved his orders, so to say, he would go in his tent and play the violin while the men were dying and the enemy was just running away, who could have been pursued and crushed. But that was not, from his mindset, that was not his task, right? His task was to defend this position or whatever. So then going back to the 19th century Kriegsspiel rules, one of the first things Reiswitz writes in his 1824 Kriegsspiel rules is, why should you use dice? Dice are used in Kriegsspiel to portray the unforeseen, the range of plausible outcomes. So while there is a sort of in the theory and the discussions about how to simulate warfare, even in Clausewitz, there's this image of war is gambling, war is a game of cards, war is all about luck and stuff. But that's of course not true, because the concept Clausewitz is describing there is much more complex. He adds the friction and the fog of war and all the things you don't know, but there are also elements you know, and if you like puzzle the right picture together from those things, you achieve success. So the dice are not there to represent any sort of luck really in combat situations, but to simulate plausible outcomes. They are based on, and that makes the original systems very difficult to adjudicate, is they are firstly, there's a set of, like a tiered set of dice with different ratios of combat results. And those are based on the strength ratios, which are then modified up and down in the sort of the dice level based on the conditions of the soldiers and the terrain and so forth. And even if you have a very clearly advantaged side that is attacking a defender, that advantaged side can still lose, because that is a plausible outcome. For whatever reason, the defender might still hold their ground. They might be in a very strong mood. They might have just rallied to the flag. Who knows? It is possible, and thus it has to be taken into account. It's not just like in sort of the modern hex and counter war games where you just look at the ratio, and then when I have the highest ratio, there's a 9% chance that I win anyway. So morale has been a very important aspect of Kriegsspiel systems from the very beginning, and that is sort of keeps to be a core mechanic really through all the rigid systems. I'm not so quite so sure about the free Kriegsspiel, because then we get into sort of a very vaguely biased umpire-based judgment there. But the rigid systems, for those, it's core element. And they also take into account, of course, then in the advanced rules that the unit that is beaten might still be able to rally quickly. There are three different outcomes. If a unit loses, there are three different morale outcomes. It can be beaten. It can be forced to retreat. It can be beaten, or it can be completely beaten. And based on that, there is a sort of a time frame in which that unit may not defend itself and may not attack again. But if you have a reserve line behind which those units can rally, they will never be completely beaten. They will just retreat behind that line, they will rally, and they'll be much more quickly ready to attack again. So that is a very important core mechanic, I think, of the rigid Kriegsspiel systems.
There's that weird R word again. Reserve? Am I pronouncing it correctly? Anyway.
Reserve.
Reserve. There we go. All right, let's get some final comments and observations. We'll start with Otto, then we'll call on KB, and then Achilles, and last but not least, Paul. And then we'll wrap up today's podcast. Otto, what do you have to say for yourself here?
Yeah, I'll go a different direction instead of instead of talking about the game system.
Okay.
I was where this battle that I tried to make this as historical as possible, and it led to me leading a lot about this area and the engagements. And it just, I think something that Paul said was in the game during the game is that something like this happened like thousands of times in World War II. This battle was part of the Tartu offensive in 1944. I'm not sure if anyone has even heard of that. It's not D-Day, it's not Stalingrad. And this battle is supposed to represent only a 4-kilometer sector with perhaps a few thousand soldiers participating in it. And this battle involved over 200,000 soldiers. And I think it's really fun and, well, interesting and eye-opening in Kriegsspiel to really bring attention to kind of the unwritten parts of history, because I'm not sure this battle was that we portrayed was really on the sidelines of this whole offensive that was on the sidelines of Operation Bagration, and it probably didn't feel like for the soldiers that actually fought in it being on the sidelines. And I think I hope this battle kind of helped put the players into the mindset of what it was like to perhaps participate in this battle, even though it is really impossible to think.
Thank you, Otto. Those are really good observations. I really like that perspective, and that, again, that just adds yet more color to these scenarios that you put on. KB, any final thoughts on yesterday's event?
I thought it was really interesting in the event how, of course, player death was so sudden and permanent. I think a lot of players, when they play at least a lot of Napoleonic games, they feel kind of invincible. They will often order that I'll personally lead an attack, I'll personally rally the troops, and I will personally go forward and scout and expose myself. And it's usually not very punished in my experience. So when I'm sitting kind of on what I think is the reserve line, and all of a sudden my entire position is erased, you kind of awoken to the fact that, in the war, death is kind of sudden and random, and it doesn't really help you that you're an officer or a player. You're still equally exposed to the elements, so to speak.
Yeah, artillery doesn't care how many push-ups you can do. Fantastic. Okay, Achilles, what are your comments?
Well, I would like to say that I think Otto accomplished his goal here, at least for me, from my perspective. Certainly, I've never heard of this particular battle before prior to doing this. I had heard of the overall operation. I mean, that one I knew about, but I hadn't heard about this particular battle. But it was really interesting to try to put myself into the frame of mind of a Soviet regimental commander planning for this limited operation in this situation, because I think he mentioned it before. It's outside my experience. If this was an American unit, we would have done this very differently, and it would have been that would have been more in line with my experience. This was taking me outside of my experience and having to think of it in that very conveyor belt automated way, because I'm having to make sure that each piece follows the next piece in a very mechanistic way, so that it works. And that was kind of interesting. That was fun. So as I read about Eastern Front battles in World War II, it provides an interesting insight into how they were viewing what they were doing. That I really appreciate. I always like learning something new. So, thank you, Otto.
All right.
You're still only 12 years old, and I hate you for it, but I like. But thank you.
Them kids these days. All right, we're going to go to Paul, and to make this a challenge for Paul, we're only going to give him 5 seconds instead of the 7 that he probably needs.
No problem. I love the phrase that these games allow us to be tourists in a moment in history. And Otto achieved that. We were able to be tourists on the battlefield of Estonia, and he did a fantastic job, and all the players did as well. Thanks so much.
That was 12 seconds, boss.
You
But all right.
owe us 7 seconds. We'll be by to collect.
Yeah. No, Paul, it's been fun to have you on board. What was it like working with Achilles as a commander-in-chief?
It was great. We're a couple old Army hands. I was a staff officer, an intelligence officer, and Achilles was a cav guy. So just by nature, we worked together well based on our specialties. So it was actually a lot of fun. The planning process was probably as much fun as the battle. Just
oh yeah,
how we just naturally interacted using old muscles. It was a lot of fun.
Well,
Yeah,
by the way, that's how Otto got me to play this game. I want you to know, because at first he told me, "Oh, hey, do you want to command this Soviet regiment in this battle of mine?" And I was like, "Oh man, I'm going to be washing my hair that weekend. I don't really want to." And then he said, "Oh, but you get to work with Paul," and I was like, "Hey, I'm there. Okay, I'm there."
Yeah, it was a planning process circa 1989, right?
Wonderful. Well, yeah, I would like to play in the next one. And I would enjoy working with any of you. So I hope that the next time, Otto, you run one of these, that maybe you'll save me a seat at the table, because these are fantastic events that you put on. I want to encourage everyone to join our Discord and look at the events section. And you can see, let me see if I can pull that up on here. If I can pull that up on the Discord here. And if I present, I'm going to just show everybody where you can find all of these awesome events that we have going on. And of course, this is really tiny on my screen, so let's make it readable. You come here to our IKS Discord, and you click on events, and here it is. Oh look, starting soon. I guess it's messed up. But look here, you have all these events that we're doing, and you can go through here, and you can see that we have ancient China. We have some sort of sci-fi fantasy thing here. We have Napoleonic. We have medieval. We have all kinds of battles here, American Civil War, that are being served up. And we do battle every Saturday at 8 a.m. Pacific, which I think is 11 a.m. Eastern time. And I think that's like 1 p.m. GMT. And I'm just taking a quick guess at that. I'm not even adding. So I could be wrong about that. But they're all here, and you get to see the time in your local time zone. So we do want people to come and enjoy what we're doing here and become a part of our group. I also want to invite you all to join and support our Patreon, which is patreon.com/Kriegsspiel. And most importantly, check out our website. Let me go to Kriegsspiel.org, and that will be my last commercial advertisement for you. If I can pull it up again, the share screen thing is a little tricky. Share screen, window, and there we are. But check out our website, because our website has all kinds of resources and stuff for you, including how to play. And if you want rules for Otto's game, I don't know, are they on here? We'll see in a minute. Here it is, World War II Ottovsky system. And you can click here, and you can get a copy of his rules so that you can run your own World War II games using Otto's rules, and they're very quick and easy to learn. So I would definitely get in here and check this out. It's absolutely free. So hop in here and give it a try. All right. That's all I have for today. I want to thank all of our guests for coming on today and talking to us. It's been a fantastic weekend because we had this amazing battle, and you guys are responsible for all the awesomeness that we've enjoyed. I want to thank you all for coming on the show, and I want to say we will see you all on our next adventure. All right. Goodbye for now. Thank you.